those three, what I believe, NBA players, and one of them is Kyrie Irving, which I believe I'm saying that correct. But again, I know him from name only, but applying fragrances and doing probably the worst job that I've ever seen. In fact, I think it would have been better if they would have drank the bottle. I think they would have had a better effect. And so I'm making a video about how to apply your fragrances. Does it matter? Yes, it matters. If you apply your fragrances wrong, then you might as well have just not even bought it. There are ways to screw up applying fragrances to where they last 10 minutes. And if no one can smell them, what's the point of having them? So, the first guy that did it, he goes, that's the thing too, the ego, the cockiness, the self-assurance that these people had. He goes, this is how I do it. You spray, you rub it together, then you take and you rub your neck, and then you open your hoodie, you spray it down your hoodie. I'm like, bro, that is the stupidest thing that I've ever seen in my life. And I think he was using Side Effect by Initius, a $300 fragrance. He just wasted the money. And then a couple of the other ones, Kyrie Irving actually put like his hand out like this and put Sauvage in his hand, like sprayed it in his hand and used his hand to apply his fragrance. And bro, I was like, where even am I? Like, this is crazy. So apparently it's not like common sense. And I know it's not common sense, but like there was no sense, no brain cells were used in the making of that video. So we're going to talk about it. First off, it matters a whole lot of things. Where you put your fragrances, what you're wearing, the season, and the type of fragrance that you bought. So we're going to break it down into 4 different sections. If I can remember 4 different sections. Let's not number it. Let's just say we're going to break it down into where you put it, what you're wearing, the season, and the type of fragrance. And let's just talk about where you put it. So, some of them were somewhat right. You take a fragrance. I have just Creed Royal Oud here. One thing you have to know about fragrances, and this kind of gets into the temperature as well, which is one thing that I guess we can talk about it now. Heat brings out the fragrance. Cold suppresses the fragrance. Heat causes it to thrive and survive. The cold numbs it. So, when you are applying your fragrance, you're applying it to warm parts of your body. There are 2 pressure points right here on the wrists. Produce a lot of heat. So, you want to spray wrist, I do one of each, spray and spray. Some people spray, dab on the other one. Don't do this. Never do this. Fragrances are very delicate. There's distinct top, middle, and base notes on a fragrance. And when you rub the fragrances together, you're destroying the chemistry and you're breaking that fragrance down even faster. You're bypassing the top notes. So now you're going straight to the mid and the base. And more than anything, you're destroying the longevity of the fragrance. So never rub. Friction, never rub it together. Which I think is number 1 mistake people make. The second one, you have 2 points right underneath your ear on the side of your neck. And I do spray, okay? Not only does this change and alter, you'll get whiffs of it so you'll be able to enjoy it, but also as you go through the day, you'll get very warm on your neck. It causes the fragrance to come out. Now there's other reasons for this as well. When I was first learning, I learned that you spray it on your wrist because as you're walking through a room, your wrist is close to people's faces. They'll be able to smell it. A lot of fragrances become skin scents. A lot of fragrances lay very close to the skin. And unless you drowned yourself in the bottle, people have to be pretty close to you to smell you. So by putting it on the wrists, you are putting your hand next to their head if they're seated. Same thing with the neck. If you're talking to somebody face to face, they'll be able to smell it because their nose is going to be right above your neck. They're going to be able to smell the projection. If you spray only front, no one will be able to smell behind you unless you're leaving a long scent trail. And let's just be honest, not a lot of fragrances have what they call a sillage, which is sort of that scent trail, that projection. So a lot of people will spray behind them as well. Some people spray their hair. One thing about this oil is that the fragrances are encapsulated in an oil that is then poured into alcohol. And fragrances thrive in oil. So if you have dry skin or dry hair, the fragrance is going to evaporate a lot faster. Some people put Vaseline. I don't recommend Vaseline. Vaseline changes and alters the chemical structure, makes your fragrances change the way that they smell. A lot of people use hyaluronic acid. There is an option to get scented shea butter, body butters, and there's a couple different companies that do fragrance scented, Dior scented body butters or something like that. So you oil up your skin, and you apply the fragrance on the skin, essentially, that you just moisturized. It's supposed to enhance it. But in any case, those are sort of the general rules. Some fragrances perform very well on clothes. Some of them do not. There's 3 different notes that perform really well, and I guess we can move on to clothing now. There's 3 different types of notes that perform horribly on clothes. Oud, or other different types of woodsy notes. Leather and tobacco. Tobacco, leather, and oud require your skin to really come out. I have sprayed fragrances 6-7 times on clothes. Go to smell it, you can't even smell the fragrance. However, some fragrances thrive on clothes, and one of those is, I have it right here actually, Club de Nuit. Incredible fragrance on clothes. Some people have allergic reactions to some notes and fragrances, myself being one of them. I've gotten better through exposure, but when you are applying a fragrance to your skin is absorbing that fragrance. And if you are putting a note that you're allergic to, I've broken out in hives. That's the worst that it's gotten. It's just uncomfortable. Sweats, you get cold sweats. So sometimes, not only is it something that you'll want to do, but you'll have to do. If you are particularly sensitive to clothes, or particularly sensitive to fragrance notes, that's a good option. Another one is, if you have a significant other rolling around on furniture or something like that, the fragrance is going to cling to that. And some clothing and furniture, sheets, whatnot, will hold a fragrance even better than skin. Club de Nuit being one of them. 4 days. I laid down on my bed one time. I didn't even spray directly on the bed. 4 days later, I still smell Club de Nuit intense. So, there's that with the clothes. So it depends on what you wear. Now, my second point on it depends on what you wear is, are you wearing something that covers your points, right? Something that is going to reduce the ability for your skin to project the fragrance. And I guess before we get that, just one more comment. If you have a hoodie and and you do this, you're an idiot. in my opinion. Why would you spray underneath of your clothes? It's like Axe body spray had a purpose, supposed to stop you from sweating and whatnot. That was one of the craziest things I've ever seen. Unless, of course, you plan on taking off the hoodie later. Maybe there's some utility there, but this is the same thing that I had problems with in applying fragrances, is that I wear suits every single day. Every day I wear suits. So, what's the utility in spraying the wrists and then covering them with shirts and heavy canvas suits? There's no utility. It's stupid. So, one thing that I do with my suits, or while wearing suits, is I'll also apply, I guess, kind of a natural fragrance cloud. I'll do the neck, but then I'll also spray, and I'll walk into it. It kind of creates a natural whiff. Is it effective? Not so much. It's not nearly as effective, but sometimes you just have to deal with what you're wearing. Wool is something that holds fragrance very well. Cotton, not so much unless it's a heavy cotton. So there is a science to this in regards to what you wear. Now, we talk about the weather. We already did a little bit. You're going to wear different fragrances depending upon the weather. And that is also going to affect how much that you have to spray. If you're wearing a fragrance in the summertime, where you know naturally it's going to hit hard, you don't have to spray it that much unless it's just a weak fragrance. If it's in the wintertime, that you know you're going to be outside, you can kind of go crazy a little bit. Before we move on to the different types of fragrances, I just want to say, though, a general rule: do not listen to anybody that tells you to spray 15 to 20 times. Don't listen to them. Run away. Do not listen to anybody that tries to make you feel guilty or inadequate by saying you're a sissy sprayer. You'll have design houses, influencers that tell you to spray a lot. Why? Why would I spray a lot? Well, because that uses up a lot of the fragrance. And if you want me to repurchase your product, I'm going to have to do it a lot sooner if I'm applying 20 sprays as opposed to 3 a day. There is no reason to spray it that many times. And when the rationality goes away, then they have to rely on trying to bully you and saying, oh, you're not a real man if you don't spray this many times. And people watch and be just like, no, I'm a man, I'll do it. There's a couple fragrance influencers, if you've seen them, you know what I'm talking about. Most fragrances, you'll be able to get by 2 or 3 or 4 fragrances, and some of them you have to wear a couple more. And that's what we're going to talk about now. Fragrances are all different, but there is a standard operating rule, and that is the concentration. Something that is a concentration, a weaker concentration, will project less and perform worse than something of a higher concentration. That means that you have to apply a lot, and you have to apply it often. So, the first type of concentration you're going to find is an eau de cologne. It's not the lowest type of concentration, but it's the lowest one you'll probably find on the market. This is an example. It's a wonderful fragrance. Very little fragrance oil, very little. If you want to test, you can see it. Apply it on your skin. Spray an EDT or an eau de cologne next to a eau de parfum. You'll see the difference in the oil sheen. The oil will be much more present, and the higher concentrated perform better than these lower ones. Are these lower ones even worth getting then? I don't know. I can tell you without fail, when I go and test a fragrance, I can, without a doubt, tell you which one is the EDT does it performs the worst? And when I'm looking for a fragrance, I want one that performs well. So that is an eau de cologne. We're talking about maybe less than 3% to 4% oil in this entire thing. But there's no hard and fast rule. There's very large margins for these things. Next is the eau de toilette. 80s, 90s, 2000s, even part of the 2010s, dominated by eau de toilettes. And here's one of them right here. Legend Spirit. It's a great fragrance. You're talking about, less than 10% of this is the fragrance oil, and has some perform great. Did you know that the Valentinos were eau de toilettes? Did you know that the Maison Margiela replica series eau de toilettes, Coach eau de toilette? There are some really good fragrances out there with good performance that are eau de toilettes. Next, we have a eau de parfum. Eau de parfum is by far the most common type of concentration you're going to see, and you can thank the Middle Eastern houses for that. Eau de parfum has kind of become the new standard, and it hovers right around that 10 to 20% fragrance oil. Again, big gap between 10 and 20%. There's no hard and fast rule here. This is an eau de parfum, wonderful concentration, whereas the eau de toilette might get you realistically 2 hours of good performance. This might get you 4 or 5. Higher concentration, and this should go without saying, but I'll say it. As you get higher up with the concentrations, you're getting higher up with the price points as well. This next one is eau de parfum intense. Now, whatever kind of wiggle room the eau de parfum had, it puts even more oil and intensity into the fragrance. It's still an eau de parfum, but there's more oil, more projection, more performance, and oftentimes the designer niche houses will actually change the note breakdown, so you might be fooled into thinking that it actually is better than it really is, because you'd be like, oh wow, I can smell this now. No, you can smell it now because it wasn't in the eau de parfum. But this is an example. This is eau de parfum intense and wonderful. 6-7 hours realistically. That's the most you really need. It really is. That's the most that you really need. Next, we have the Perfume. The Perfume, you're around that 20 to 25 range percent oil. This is a step up. They are greasier. They are less floral, typically more rich and complex. They get rid of notes, typically from eau de parfum to parfum. They simplify the fragrance because it is more concentrated. I prefer eau de parfums over parfums for that reason. But this is an example of a parfum. In my experience, the eau de parfums often outperform the parfums. But then you also have intense parfums. So if that wasn't bad enough, you also have intense parfums, which are the exact same thing as the eau de parfum is to the intense eau de parfum. And a good example of that is something like this: Boss Bottled Elixir and Ralph's Club Elixir is another one. They are intense parfum concentrations. Killer performance, intense parfum. I can tell the difference, and I prefer the intense parfum over the eau de parfum, and even the intense eau de parfum. And then you have the highest grade, which is typically 25 to 40%. Again, a lot of wiggle room. And this is called the extrait. You will notice a huge difference when you spray an extrait on. It'll just stay there. There will be no evaporating, just see a pure oil sheen, and you might have that oil sheen for a long time. It's very highly concentrated, very expensive, sometimes utilized by niche houses. Niche Chanel is one of them. But most niche houses still use eau de parfums, like Parfums de Marly. This is an example of an extrait. This is Supremacy, Not Only Intense. And where do you see all these? Well, you see them on the bottom of all fragrances are going to have their concentration. This is Extrait de Parfum. So that's kind of your hard and fast rule, I will say. It's not as simple just to say that the eau de parfum is better than the eau de toilette, or that the parfum is better than the eau de parfum. It's not that simple. Go to a place and try all the versions. Try EDT, EDP, and parfum most times. I found myself picking the eau de parfum, or the intense, versus the parfum. Even if it's around the same price, I'll still go with the lower concentration because I like it better. But then there's something else that we can talk about, which is the individual fragrances. Some fragrances, even though that they might be a high concentration, suck at performing and projecting. Parfums de Marly's, Herod, terrible. Ojan, not great. And then you'll have a eau de parfum, or even eau de toilette, based in Margiela by the fireplace. Great. And then, of course, you'll have this bomb of tobacco fragrances like red tobacco that it doesn't matter if it was an eau de cologne, it'll knock your socks off because it's so strong. So it's also not as easy just to say, hey, all of these fragrances, get the highest concentration you can and spray it this many times. It's not that simple. It also depends on where you're going. Are you going to be outside? We'll spray more. Are you going to be inside? Spray less. Are you going to an office meeting? Then don't wear tobacco. Wear something non-offensive and don't spray it that often, that many times. There's so many things. Fragrances are not, unless you don't care about what anybody thinks about you, you're unemployed and you have all the money in the world, it has to be a consideration that you make where you're going and what you can wear to it. We don't wear fragrances for compliments, but we definitely don't wear fragrances for insults. We don't care if we're loved because of them, but we don't want to be hated. And wearing a fragrance that you spray 20 times, you're going to be hated. That's a guarantee. You are going to be hated. You are got a one-way ticket to the HR director, and they're going to make a new rule about banning fragrances because of you. So know your fragrance. It's also not as simple to say about the concentrations. Know your fragrance. Some fragrances, even though they're going to be less concentrated, might even be better performers. Some fragrances contain notes like oud and leather, which are divisive. People don't like them. Wear less. So, just be smart about it. But as a whole, this is your kind of guide. So, be mindful of the points to spray. Do not rub anything together. Be wary of the clothes you wear. Different clothes mean different applications. Be wary of the seasons and the weather, about what cologne you're going to wear, and also how you're going to wear it. And then that's your little guide to the concentrations, but there's no hard and fast rule on those. Know your fragrance, know your cologne, and you'll know through trial and error which one to do. And if you have any questions, I say this all the time, people put in forums or something. Oh, you guys told me it wasn't that strong, so I put on 4 sprays. And then I went to work. Why? Why'd you do that? Try a fragrance at home by yourself. Try it out before you actually wear it in a crowded room full of people. That's a good lesson.